Well, it is such an honor to be here as I'm dodging these very intense sunbeams. It is such an honor to be here and to welcome all of you. As I said just a little bit ago, this is a record for us. We have 78 signed up, so that's really great. I heard Deidre speak a few years ago, and I was completely thrilled with her and have been a huge fan ever since. So it's really delightful that we were able to have her tonight. Deidre has a vision for a prosperous and sustainable future for Iowa, where we build a common ground together. She stands for the democratic values that we all hold dear, but it takes money to stand up to the Iowa Republicans. So I hope you can let her know that you have her back by making a generous contribution. Deidre has a real shot at changing the dynamic of Iowa politics, but she can't do it without us. We put the donation link in the chat and have included those links in the emails we've sent you. And now it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Deidre.
Hello again to the Potluck Insurgency. It's been a little bit since you all and I have been connected in person, but I will never forget the opportunity that I got to spend with you all at the home of the Cranstons when I was running for Secretary of State. A lot of folks were unsure about whether or not we were going to be successful in that race, but you all were there with me, generous in your time and in your giving, and look at where we made it. I continued after that 2018 race and stayed committed to engaging people in our party, even went on to be VP Harris's state chair when she was running for president. And each and every step of the way, I've gotten to know more Iowans in a more intimate way. And here we are right now in a moment in our state where we are taking monumental steps backwards. And I'm of the mindset that we can interrupt that. Because I know what we're capable of as Iowans. I've seen us grit it out to the end, give our all, put it out there because we believe in what this state can be. And that's the reason why I'm running, folks, because we know what this state can be. We know what's possible. And I want to lead a government that has you all as a priority. And not only as a priority, but I'm walking in lockstep with each and every one of you all who are willing to be a part of this change that we so feverishly want to see. This notion that you've got to rob Peter to pay Paul, I know we've unsubscribed to that as Democrats. We know that we've got to make sure Paul is good, Peter is good, and Paula is good. We know we have to invest our time and energy to do the hard work so that when we talk about a rising tide in this state, that it's lifting every single one of our boats. And we start by reforming our education system in such a way that we're moving it forward. We're moving it forward. We're a state that was once #1 in education, and we're falling farther and farther down the list. And regardless of what people agree or disagree with the rankings, we see the damage that's being caused. Our teachers are leaving the state to go work in other states. They're not just leaving the profession. They're going to work in other states. We've got to make sure that we have an education system that lends credence and value to the voice of the teacher again. And we do that by restoring collective bargaining and enhancing collective bargaining. We know that our teachers and our educators, our custodians, our people who are on the support lines, supporting our students through their education process, are critical to that process. And their voice means more now than it ever has. Why? Because it's been silenced. And we've got to bring those voices to fruition so that we can move our education system forward, because we're not asking for too much when we're asking for an education system that's fully preparing our students for tomorrow. We're not asking for too much. That is the basic essential mechanism of what Iowans have agreed 100 years before Brown versus Board of Education. Nearly 100 years before, we agreed that every student, no matter their race, their gender, should be afforded equity in an education system and have equal access to that system. Meanwhile, we have a governor that's signing a 2.5% increase. A 2.5% increase on our education budget, not even meeting the level of necessity related to inflation. And we've done that now 3 years in a row. And we wonder why. But we see the damage that's being caused. Our rural schools are closing. Our students are leaving the state, vowing never to come back. Our teachers are leaving the profession. We see the damage that's being caused, yet we know that there are solutions. And that's the part of the belief, folks, that we can do something about it, but we need new leadership if we are to. This leadership has made it apparent that their priority is not people. Their priority is not you. It's not Iowa. It's something else. And we don't have to spend time trying to figure it out. We can just vote her out. And we do that in this year. When we talk about our economic development system, and we see manufacturers leaving this state, even as of the last couple of months, vowing never to come back because they're looking for more opportunities to build their workforce. While the rest of the country, folks, is experiencing a workforce shortage and a workers' crisis, we're dealing with it in a different way, to the point where our manufacturers are trying to give up on us. We can't let that happen, because those companies are not only pertinent to the economic development of our state, but more importantly, it's employing Iowans, people who we know need jobs to provide for their families, to put food on their table, to have a roof over their head. And we can do that given we have a governor that's welcoming folks and also focused on retaining the talent that we have. I tell you what won't retain talent: a flat tax cut and a flat tax rate won't retain talent. A third of Iowans won't even benefit from that bill. A third of Iowans will not see one change positively in their lives. They may see increase to income tax. They may see increase to property taxes to accommodate for this terrible decision, but they won't see growth. The top percent of Iowans, the top 1% of Iowans are going to see about $5,500 a month 4 years from now. It's a nice piece of pocket change, but most Iowans are only going to get $50 4 years from now. You put $50 4 years from now on a billboard, who is going to be busting through the doors to get into this state? When we think about retaining the talent that we have, is that the best that we can give them when we don't even have a competitive minimum wage? We're losing talent, not just teachers, we're losing talent in the state of Iowa. We're losing nursing staff. We're 44th in the nation in mental health care workers. But again, we know that's not where we belong, because we've done better, because we know better, but we've got to do something about it. So I'm going to stop real quick and let you all ask all the questions that you want to talk about related to policy. I'm going to let you steer the policy conversation. I talked a great deal about education and some about economic development, but there's so many other issues that are critical: mental health care, physical health care, dental care, all the cares, child care. Those are big issues. Climate, regenerative agriculture, reducing our carbon footprint, big issues. Leaving this land better than the way we found it, big issues. And so many others. But I'll let you all guide the discussion on Q&A, because I know we've got to get to our esteemed Secretary of State candidates.
So if you'd like to ask a question, just on your computer, go down below there and take a look at where they have the reactions, and then raise your hand there if you'd like to speak your question, or we also the chat. Click on chat and you can put your question right in there. So who's going to have our first question? So I can see one in the chat here. Deidre, it says, how do you plan to beat Reynolds with her huge bank account? Commercials can really affect voters. And that's from Pat Bowen.
Great question. So we've got a plan of action for that, because I didn't come from money, and I've been conditioned to stretch every dollar that I've ever received in efforts to achieve the goal that dollar is intended to achieve. What I will say is, if you look at that poll that recently came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Reynolds is at 51%, and she spent more than $1 million. What I believe is that her money will only go so far. The way we combat what Reynolds is doing and the Republicans is doing is that we allow them to be their authentic selves, to spend as much money as they choose to, how they choose to. But our focus should be amongst Democrats. Our focus should be around engaging those Democrats that are disenchanted with the process, that maybe perhaps wanted to be here today, but they're not here. We want to put our energy there. We're going to organize. We know where we underperformed in 2018. amongst independents. Only 45% of independents turned out in 2018. We're going to go make sure that those independents have a home with us at the Democratic Party. We will be that party with the big tent, that welcoming person. That's what we're best positioned to do. 18 to 34-year-olds, less than half of them turned out. And I know we can do better than that. And then amongst our communities of color, less than half of those folks turned out. And so this is going to be an opportunity for us to build momentum by engaging voters. We know that I think it was a little less than 100,000 people were taken off the voter rolls. We've got to go get them back engaged. We're done with the petition phase. We've had a few weeks break, but come right before Easter, it's going to be time for us to start getting people registered to vote again, because we'll all be gathering amongst our families and our friends on Easter and in other points of convening in the month of April. Let's start getting people registered to vote. Let's start getting them re-engaged. We've got the time to be able to do this, so we can do it now. That's how we beat them. There is no amount of money that can stand against the Iowa Democratic Party any day out of the week.
Hey, thanks, Deidre, and thanks for that question, Pat. Leslie, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Deirdre. It's nice to see you again.
Good to see
I
you
have a
too.
question for you. I just drove home from visiting our son at the State Mental Health Hospital in Independence, where he is getting the best care he's gotten over the course of this 14 years of illness. Unfortunately, he didn't get there soon enough, and we don't have enough of those beds across our state for everybody else who really needs that level of comprehensive, multidisciplinary care that's actually helping him. Would you be willing to add beds at our state psychiatric hospitals and other subacute care levels of care as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. It has to meet the demand. We have less than 100 state beds. We have less than 1,000 beds in this state for a population of more than 3 million. That is, from my vantage point, aiding and abetting malpractice, because Iowans need this care more so now than they ever have before, and they're raising their hands to get it. And it's obvious and apparent, no matter where we go in this campaign, that mental health care and access to beds and the actual services is abysmal in this state. And we know that it's been an issue because by law, as of last year, we should have had 6 access points throughout the state. We have 2. One in Johnson County, one in Lynn County. So we already knew it was a need and we're 4 behind, and that was prior to COVID. And so we've got to step up our game. Otherwise, we will be perpetuating a crisis. We also have to get more people in the field as well, which means that we have to increase the reimbursement rates to ensure that those providers can not only provide the service, but they can render that service by getting good people to come in and take on those jobs and stay in those jobs.
Hey, thanks, Deidre, and thanks, Leslie, and thanks for all you do in Des Moines and really promoting the needs that we have for mental health. Let's go to Liz O'Hara's question. Can you please talk about the Republican drive to promote the right to own guns over and above the right to safety?
Repeat that question one more time.
How do you, can you please talk about the Republicans' drive to promote the right to, the Republicans' drive to promote the right to own guns over and above the right to safety?
That's a good question. And we saw that line of thinking even related to the East High School shooting a few weeks ago. Some of you all may know, I used to coach girls basketball at East High School. In fact, I was just up there in February in a practice with some of the girls, just volunteering. And there was a shooting a few weeks ago, and it took our governor some time to respond to that shooting. And when she did, she blamed the education system. And she has a tendency to do that, to blame the most vulnerable amongst us, whether it be entity or individual, to circumvent resolving the true challenge that we're facing. Our education system wasn't the reason why 3 students, 3 young people were shot, why one of them died, why at least 6 individuals young were even considering doing what they chose to do. We've got to make sure that gun safety is a priority. amongst folks. We a couple of years ago, a bill was signed that said we no longer have to get permits to purchase a gun. No one was asking for that, and permits were reasonable. If you have a firearm, you should be required to have a permit in order to purchase that firearm. And so we see the relaxed tendencies they have around gun safety, but from my vantage point, we should be promoting gun safety versus just circumventing the problem, because our laws are too relaxed, and we don't want to take people's guns away, but we do need to ensure that folks are safe. And considering this, folks, the challenges that we're seeing with mental health coupled with relaxed gun laws, we are perpetuating a crisis. Got to identify everything that's happening in order to make sure that we keep our communities safe and we keep the individual safe as well.
Thanks, Deidre, and thanks, Liz, for that question. Jane Cranston wants to know, well, actually, she indicates for people who don't know you, could you talk about your background?
For my background, so I started a small business when I was an undergrad at Drake University, and I started that small business in response to the recession. Folks were getting laid off from their jobs and had no choice but to become entrepreneurs. And so here I was, this Drake student. I also worked for Bankers Trust at the time and was doing a lot of marketing work. And so I started that business. To date, we've helped more than 1,000 businesses. In fact, we did another group body of work in response to the crisis statewide when the pandemic came. We knew early on that many of our small businesses, specifically our disadvantaged business owners, these are women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, businesses owned by people of color, they did not get access to the immediate federal dollars or state funds. And so I brought together 14 organizations. We raised more than $500,000, or nearly $500,000, and helped more than 100 businesses throughout the state, not just with resources, but we connected them to financial coaches and business coaches to help them if they needed to pivot their business. I've also done a great deal of work on the political side, both nonpartisan and partisan. I've worked with school board races all the way to presidential races, volunteered for the first time in 2008 for the Obama campaign. So I believe in organizing. I believe in getting out there and connecting to people. Also went on to work for Obama in 2012, where we had a very successful race. I was African-American vote director that year, and my job was to make sure that African-Americans turned out to vote, and we doubled the propensity of turnout for African-Americans, which is excellent. And that's one thing I'm excited about in this election as well. Also done nonpartisan engagement work, working with the NAACP, the vice president of our League of Women Voters chapter here in the Des Moines area, because I love voting. But needless to say, I always saw government as an opportunity to resolve regular everyday problems for folks, especially when we see in general the massive issues related to education and healthcare. And I always believe that attitude reflects leadership. And right now, we have the leadership of a governor that is not leading us down a path that's good for any of us. And she's got people following that, and we've got to interrupt that. And so everything I've done in my life, I believe, has led me up until these moments. Never thought I'd be running for governor, ever. In fact, when somebody suggested it a couple of years ago, I probably rolled my eyes, but needless to say, here we are. This is an opportunity for all of us to advance what we believe our community should look like. And I'm excited that I get to be in this seat, but more importantly, I get to do it alongside each and every one of you all.
Great background, and thanks for suggesting that, Jane. Sonia Ettinger asked, what specifically do you suggest for paying the teachers a real wage and for stopping the flow of vouchers at the expense of special teaching assistants for students who are having trouble?
Right. That's why I believe in bargaining, public collective bargaining. Our teachers, we have so many of them throughout the state, upwards of 50,000 or so, including the other support staff that helps run our schools. And opening up that table, I think, will lend way to what a competitive wage is going to look like, what a competitive salary is going to look like for their contracts. It may be different in Carroll than it is in Des Moines, different in Des Moines than it is in Ida Grove. But needless to say, opening that space back up, I think can create that opportunity for us to negotiate what those wages should look like. But we should not be paying our teachers. I think we're ranked like 30th in the nation in teachers' pay. And we can do a lot better than that, because look, they're leaving to go to other states to teach. And so if that is that should be an indicator for us that there's something about those other states that we're not tapping into. And a part of that is pay, but also a part of that is that value in the voice as well.
Hey, thanks, Deidre, and thanks, Sonia, for that question. The next thing is not a question, but it's from Cam saying, hey, here's a nice website that you can donate to this campaign. So I know Jane has done that earlier today. So just click on that link and you can still hear what we're talking about while you're filling out that donation. Next question is from Linda. Linda says, what message do you have for Iowa farmers, producers, to encourage protecting Iowa's vitally important environment?
Absolutely. So our farmers are business owners. When I talk about strengthening small businesses across the state, our farmers are included in that category. They're running a business. And what's incredibly important from my vantage point is if we're going to interrupt how they do business, that we've got to help ensure that they can still provide for their families in the process. And so when we talk about clean water, when we talk about different farming practices, we've got to make sure that those conversations are happening with all of the stakeholders at the table so that we can truly have a serious plan on how we address water quality, how we address how we sequester carbon, how we address the healthiness of our soil. We've got to have our landowners at the table. We have to have our activists at the same table, our farmers at the same table, and we also have to have the larger agricultural organizations at the same table so that we can truly align in this value that we've got to put Iowans first, and in doing so, the land has to be prioritized, treated as a gem, and our practices are going to come to terms with that. It's not going to be an easy conversation. It's going to be a challenging one, but it's one that's worth having. We also, in tandem with that, has to make sure the alignment with DNR is there. We have to invest more in DNR, especially as it relates to keeping our parks clean and restoring our water and the vegetation that exists in our park areas. That means, not evicting 23 DNR park rangers from their homes, but figuring out a way how we come up with $1 million to keep them there. That means putting trash cans at all of our parks so people aren't putting their trash in the water or on the side of the road. That means hiring people to go pick up that trash. It takes investment to do that, but this is the coolest thing about this situation. The Biden administration is working their darndest to make sure that we get resources for water quality, for infrastructure, for bridges. And Cindy Axing is right there with him, trying to make sure Iowa gets all the resources that it can. They need a partner in this state to put that money to good use, so that it's not just being thrown at one organization that's an advocacy group and has a good marketing ploy about what they're doing, but that is actually going to our counties across the state, restoring our surface water, strengthening our potential for economic development, but more importantly, ensuring that we talk about a cover crop investment, that we're making it worthwhile for the farmer. Okay, those are just some of the things that we can do, but that table has to be together.
Hey, thanks, Deidre, and thanks, Linda. Jane mentions about what about water quality? You've hit on that a little bit, but also what do you do to mitigate the climate crisis?
I think it's investments in prioritizing, right? I mean, when I talk about clean water, how we can restore those practices, there are going to have to be guidelines on how we treat our land. But we can't just have the activists telling the farmers what they should do and Big Ag doing whatever they want to do. That table is where we resolve that. And I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers to those questions, but the answers are out there. The answers are out there. That's one of the reasons why I've created these policy teams for our group. If you want to get invested to help us create best practices that are aligned in what can be a policy and a vision statement, please connect with CAM. We have environmental, we have education, we have healthcare and mental health care. These are all ways that you all can add value to the answers to these questions. But there is no one size fits all approach. There are a few things that I know off the bat that we can do just based off of what I know we can do. The investment in cover crops, making sure that we're investing in cleaning our water and investing in regenerative agriculture. USDA can't do it all. The state has to be committed there. But here's the thing, at the end of the day, we feed this world and we fuel this country. There is no reason why we should not be leading in environmental sustainability. We've got to be open for new jobs in that arena. wind is one thing, but we know that this administration has a focus on solar and on batteries. Meanwhile, in Iowa, they're taking away solar tax credits. And so we've got to refocus our energy to make sure that we're doing for people in this instance. And that means prioritizing land. That's as good as I got for you right now until we start pushing out these policies from what our team comes up with.
Hey, thanks a lot, Deidre, and thanks, Jane, for that. I know Deidre did mention Cam. So Cam, if you could put your email in the chat so that people know how to get a hold of Deidre as political director there. Next one, I think, is Martha Fields. I think she's checking up on you. She's saying, how many counties have you visited? Exposure is everything.
I don't even know. Cam, can you tell me how many counties we've visited? Our goal is to get through all 99 by the end of June. So we don't have a whole lot of time.
Yeah, no, we are. I don't have an exact count for you, but I know we are over 35 so far. So that gives us just about 60 some to go. And again, if you guys know folks in other counties and they have events going on, feel free to shoot me that email. We love to just show up where folks are already at, but we're more than willing to help set up some meet and greets in people's homes, restaurants, bars, wherever folks want to join us, we'll be there for you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Cam. And really, thanks, Martha, for that question, because really, Deidre is really doing fine in the polls without being known. And if she can get all 99 counties, I mean, she's got it. So thanks for that, Martha.
We were just in Carroll earlier today, and folks were just super excited. It was my first time in Carroll during this campaign. And we got more events created at that event. Then we'll be doing Red Elk on Tuesday, and there's already people interested. So every time we go, people get interested in planning more events for us. But it is definitely a priority. My mantra is to truly meet people where they are, not just on their phones, not on their TVs, but in person. And as many of these smaller counties that I've gone to, there's consensus that, man, we wish we saw more Democrats. So one ask that I have of you all, you could always contribute to the campaign, and I accept those resources. But the last time I was in Johnson County, I urged people to get outside the county every once in a while, to go visit other counties, see how they're doing. Iowa County, Lee County, Dubuque. I mean, just go to some of these other places and volunteer when they're doing weekend of actions. I want to make sure you take care of home first, but every once in a while, go see how these other counties are doing, because they could use some love out there. They're holding it down, and it's hard. It's hard, and it's nothing like seeing another human that you can, create that common ground scenario with.
Hey, thanks a lot, Deidre, and that's a great idea. Actually, personally here in Johnson County, we are reaching out to our contiguous counties, and we're going to be working with them because we do have some very common districts within a couple of those, and we want to really spread the word. So let's thank you for that, Martha. And then let's go on down to the dials. Kim Reynolds knows how to mislead her constituents, spread misinformation to secure votes. How do we combat that the spreading of conspiracy theories as a political strategy?
We know how to organize. That is how we combat it, right? Remember what I said earlier. We got to let the Republicans be their authentic selves. We tried in 2016 to combat that. We tried in 2018 to combat that. We tried in 2020 to combat that. But that's what they want us to do. They want us to focus on them. When I was preparing for a basketball game, we had a coach's plan for the entire game. And there was each practice has a plan too, leading up to that day, that game day. We've got to focus on our plan. What we know we didn't do well is exhaust our voter base. We did not get people out the way that we should have because we underperformed in some of our districts that are heavily Democratic. Why? Because the Republicans didn't run anybody against us. And so the electorate was kind of subdued if they didn't have a candidate at the top of the ticket that they could align with. We've got to do better there. Let's not focus our attention on that travesty over there, even though we want to for good reason. But I don't think we can do both because we've tried. We tried to organize ourselves and focus on them. We keep our message clear as Democrats. We make sure that we're creating that space for independents to want to be a part of what we're doing. No matter where I go, Republicans, Democrats, independents, because I go to a lot of events that are not just so partisan, because I want to connect with a variety of people. People are done with this lack of civility. They're done with the fact that it cringes them to have to think 2 or 3 times on whether or not they go and talk to their neighbor that may not align with them politically. People want that spirit to be dissipated, but we can take ownership of that by doing what we're good at doing. We've never been good at combating another party's message. Never. So why act like we're good at it now? Let's do what we know how to do, organize our people. And I know you're probably thinking, Deidre, the Democrats don't have a message. We have a message, folks. We have a message. But I want you to prioritize the messenger, folks. You are the messenger. And the message is that you are not alone. That I see your challenges. I see your issues. I have them too. Let's talk about how we resolve this. She's obviously not paying attention to us. We can do better. That's the message, that we're human beings. But don't negate the most important part, the messenger, you.
Hey, thanks, Deidre. That's great. Thanks to the dials. I'm going to let.
Great question.
Okay, great. Galen has a question. Deidre, I really admire your knowledge and passion. Thank you for running and still believing in Iowa after the current administration in Iowa. We are better than this. What are the most important things we can do to help you get elected?
The most important thing, one, believe that we can do this, and believe it with your voice, believe it with your actions, believe it with everything in you, because people will be attracted to that belief. By you believing in this, they will believe in themselves and their part in this. We've done it like this before, folks, and it has worked. And we've done it not just in political spaces, we've done it as human beings. That belief in self, that self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, we can. Remember that phrase. That's the most important thing. Even when you see a sign that irritates you, use that sign to go and engage a voter or engage a friend, to connect with them, to fight for that common ground. When you're on Fox News, rather than go on Facebook and share the article, maybe go share something good, share something encouraging, share an event that you want somebody to be a part of. Let's use our energy to stimulate growth and reconnection and building community in this party. It's in desperate need of that. And I can't reiterate that. If you do that, you are doing that for me and for all of us, and we all need that. And nobody can do that better than you. Think about I can't come to your network and do what you can do with your network. Use it, work it, and it's gonna help all of us.
Hey, great point. Real appreciate that. Leslie indicates that donation sign is not only fast, but it's easy to do. So please do that. Cam mentions that not only can you donate, but you can also join the team. So again, I give Cam an email there. In a way, and I have a couple other very positive messages. So anyone else have a question for Deidre? Yeah, go ahead, Mateen, if you'd like to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go for it. Yeah, you're very exciting, Ms. DeJear. I've kind of tried to look into you and your background, and a lot of positive things. So I hope to get involved in some way in the future and to help you. So my question is really in relation to your motivation for running and your values, especially when talking to voters, highlighting what are the values of the candidate, and just so they know, what your intentions are and what you hope to achieve. So my question is, what are the values that we should showcase as volunteers when talking to voters about you?
That's a good question. you know, my up and foremost value is that of public service. I'm here to serve and put people first. And unfortunately, other things have gone before people for far too long. And that is not what government is intended to do. In fact, our Constitution states very boldly and proudly and largely, we the people. And I know there was a point in time where it was just a select few people that meant good for. But over time, we've been able to edit and make progress and ensure that everybody has access to life, liberty, and happiness. And that's unfortunately being interrupted by our governor right now. She is a stumbling block in Iowans' path. And we've got to get her out of the way so that we can start doing good for all people. There's this notion that a rising tide lifts all boats. I want all of our boats to rise. And for people who have holes in their boats, I want us to figure out how to fix those. But we all can be better if we focus on it. We saw what that looked like in 2020. We came together despite party differences to get things done, and it worked. So let's keep going down that direction. Those are my values.
Thanks so much, Deidre. And really, thank you for all these questions. It's really wonderful to have you. I'm going to turn it over to Janice because we have a couple of other folks on today. But yeah, thank you, Deidre. Thank you, Cam. We're with you all the way. So thanks for this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much for coming, Deidre, and thank you, Ed. When Deidre first really burst onto the scene in Iowa 4 years ago, it was as a candidate for Secretary of State. We've seen since then what we can do as voters when people actually have the chance to vote. When the current Secretary of State sent out absentee ballot request forms to every single registered voter, we had record voter turnout. So what did he do? What did the Republicans in the legislature do immediately afterwards? They started to chip away at our voting rights and our ability to vote, particularly vote by mail, because it was so successful. So next we have two Democratic candidates for Secretary of State, two excellent auditors. We have tremendous auditors around the state, including here in Johnson County, of course, but the two who are running are Eric Van Lancker from Clinton County and Joel Miller from Lynn County. And we're going to hear from both of them for about 5 minutes each, starting with Eric, and then we're going to have some Q&A with them. So if you are, I think I saw both of you on, take it away, Eric.
All right, thanks, Janice. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to this great group for having us and be able to have this time together to talk about such an important issue. I am Eric Van Lancker, and I believe we need a voter advocate running elections in the state. I've been Clinton County Auditor and Commissioner of Elections for 4 terms now, and what that means is I know what elections are like on the front lines. And I've run dozens of successful elections. And I have an utmost respect for my auditor peers and their staff all across the state for what they do, and especially an undying gratitude for all the folks who work the polls on election day and do the painstaking work of counting our absentee ballots. And I'm sure some of you here on this call have done that. So thank you very much, and God bless you for doing that. That's a great job. So look, Iowa's elections, they're fair, they're nonpartisan, they're neutral. They're efficient, they're professional, and shoot, they're even friendly, right? And I love that about our elections. In fact, it's like a sacred commitment to me when I talk about protecting our elections. I've been doing this job for 12 years, and still to this day, the favorite thing about my job is helping my neighbors vote and trust in the outcome. And that's what I mean about being a voter advocate. We need a Secretary of State with the judgment and experience to right the ship and get Iowans back to the business of voting the way we always have. But today, some of our neighbors, Iowans don't believe that voting is that sacred right to protect. In fact, we're home now to some of the most cynical, short-sighted partisan attempts to manipulate voter turnout anywhere in America. They know they can't call it voter fraud, so they change the election laws and work the refs and hope that Iowans lose faith in a system that we all cherish. They did the same thing with our land, our main streets, and our schools are doing to our elections. I've never understood why they hate what Iowans saw fit to build. Look, their approach is deeply wrong, but you and I together can fix this. So I've been to the Capitol the last 12 years. I've been there, to promote the good election legislation. I've been there to fight the bad, and I've shaken my head at the ugly, just like all of you have. But here's 3 things I'd like to do together when I'm your Secretary of State. First of all, we're all going to fight for fair access to a ballot while maintaining confidence in our election. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to restore early voting. We all know that absentee voting works best when our voters have 29 days, and even when our administrators have 29 days for absentee voting. And a very important issue also in Johnson County is we need to restore the ability for the county auditor and commissioner of elections to set up satellite voting as they know how their voters vote. That's very important for our voters. And then the third thing we're going to do is count all the ballots. Halting the count of absentee ballots at the close of an election day is totally irresponsible when we have reliable barcode technology and we know the voter returned their ballot in good faith. So these are uphill climbs, I know that, folks, but if you're in it, I'm in it with you, and I can't wait to do that. And let me tell you real quick why I think I can win the Secretary of State race. First of all, I've been reelected here in a river county that's turned red. My last 2 reelections, I was reelected on a ballot that Donald Trump won in my county. So I think that's a skill that Democrats around the state would be interested in. And secondly, we're off to a really great start with this campaign. I'm very happy with the folks who have endorsed us so far. People like Rita Hart, former Congressman Dave Loebsack, Sue and Bob Dvorsky, your former Sheriff Lonnie Pograbic is on that list. And of course, your County Auditor Travis Weipert is on that list as well, along with 8 other county auditors from across the state, big and small counties and other county officials. And look, you can find all my endorsements on ericvanlancker.com, but really it's your endorsement that counts to me right now, okay? I'm working hard to get your support to be the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State. So you can find me on Twitter at AuditorVL, also on Facebook at Vote Van Lancker, and of course my website is ericvanlancker.com. Again, thanks for having me here tonight.
Thank you so much, Eric. Now we will hear from Joel Miller from Lynn County.
Good evening, the Potluck Insurgency. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm going to give you a brief overview. Well, I'm Joel Miller, candidate for Secretary of State. I grew up on a dairy farm north of Independence, Iowa, served in the U.S. Army for 3 years, served as mayor of Robbins, was the chair of the Lynn County Democrats from 2000 through 2004, former member of the IBEW, and also have been the Lynn County Auditor, Commissioner of Elections for 15 years. So let me talk about why I decided to run. I have some themes that I'll talk about as well, but the driving reason behind why I decided to run was the 2021 election laws. As I indicated, I've been the county auditor for 15 years. I have worked very hard, tried to be innovative to figure out how we could increase voter turnout. And we finally did that in Lynn County. In November 2020, we had 80% turnout of all of our registered voters, active and inactive. We were the top urban county in the state from a voter turnout standpoint. And that was when we raised the bar very high. And when I saw those laws coming through, I knew that that was going to be a thing of the past. And so I thought there needs to be somebody in there that is really getting out in front of the issues and trying to do what we can do to change the laws back to the way they were, but also to work within the existing laws. So I took the fight to the Republicans in July of 2020 when I issued pre-filled absentee ballot request forms. And that didn't hurt, even though I lost the court battle, it didn't hurt the turnout. As I said, we broke the record there on that voter turnout in November of 2020, 80%. In 2021, when the Secretary of State inactivated over 294,000 voters, which I contend was illegal because he enacted it with the law going backwards instead of the law going forward. He shouldn't have done that. So I issued him a technical infraction for inactivating 17-year-olds that weren't even eligible to vote in the election. He also inactivated deceased voters, inactivated pending voters. So he basically really messed up the voter registration database across the state. He corrupted it. And to my knowledge, he still hasn't fully fixed it. I took the fight to the Republican legislature based upon the laws they passed. When I printed absentee ballot request forms in a local newspaper that went to over 80,000 households before the November 2021 election, 23% of our voters used those, of the people applying for absentee ballot request forms, did so via that ad in the newspaper. That was something we could do within the framework of the existing election laws. I'm the only county auditor to do that. I took the risk. Others were afraid to do that for fear that they might receive a technical infraction. Well, sometimes you just have to gamble. You have to take the risk, and you have to know the law and believe that you're doing the right thing. And I was doing the right thing in all three of those cases. There are still other things that we could do. Other county auditors could print those absentee ballot request forms in the newspapers before elections, so people without printers have an opportunity to print those, fill those out and send them back to their county auditor. They could do it themselves, or as Secretary of State, it could direct county auditors to do that. For the November 2021 election, my office was open. There was a place for people to vote 7 days a week for all 20 days of early voting. Again, I believe I was the only county auditor in the state to keep my office open. So if somebody wanted to vote on Saturday and Sunday, they had access to the ballot box. I printed the new election laws in the newspaper that went to over 80,000 households, so people know what the laws are. How do you know how to play the game of voting if you don't know what the rules are? Nobody else did that. I printed them out there, sent them out to those people. Those are things you can do within the existing framework of the laws. What can you do if elected to the Secretary of State? Well, you can lobby for automatic voter registration for 17-year-olds. Why go through all the trouble of trying to visit individual schools to have people sign up and do it that way? Why not just do it when the kids go to get their driver's licenses at age 17? Take care of it at that time. It would make it much more efficient. And I've got other ideas that I'll wait to address in the questions. But I think in order to be the Secretary of State, you can't sit on your hands. You can't just see which way the wind's blowing. And that's what our current Secretary of State did. See which way the wind blowing, and then finally make a decision like he did on the absentee ballot request forms he set out for the general election. He waited till other county auditors did it before he decided to do it. He wasn't the first. I was the first, or somebody else was the first, but we were way ahead of him. So thanks for listening. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much to both of you. So Ed, do you want to moderate the questions?
Sure, yeah. Again, thank you both. If you'd like a question, to ask a question, actually make it so it's a question that would be for both of the Secretary of States rather than just for one of them, one of the candidates for Secretary of State. So again, if you'd like to go down below there to reactions, click on raise hand. If you'd like to ask a question, or just in the chat, go ahead and type your question right in there.
And Ed, if I may, while we're waiting for questions, and Joel and I, we appear at soup suppers and everything together, and we talk about this. We often find ourselves as the last ones on agendas. We like to say, and with all due respect to the next governor of Iowa, we like to think that you're saving us because saving the best for last, right? But seriously, let's not sleep on the Secretary of State race. It is so vitally important in Iowa right now, especially when we got a presidential race just a couple years. I know we're getting through 22 yet, but that's going to be so important that we have a Democratic Secretary of State. So just just don't want to, we want everyone to make sure that Secretary of State race is really up there on their list and that they're talking about it.
Thanks, Eric, for that. Joel, you want to comment about how important it is?
Well, I think the other fact is that the only two contested races on the ballot are on the primary election ballot are Secretary of State and U.S. Senate. So I think next month you're having the Senate candidates. So yeah, I think we need to talk about these issues, and of course the elections begin with voting, actually with voter registration and all the issues leading up to it. So we're the kind of the guys behind the Wizards of Oz behind the curtain here, making things happen so that everyone has access to the ballot box. And I think that's one thing you can count on with two county auditors. We've ran elections. We've been doing this for a long time, unlike our current Secretary of State, who's never ran an election at the local level and only decides to dictate directives and demands, and yet does not provide transparency within his office, doesn't communicate to us. We usually find out what's going on via press releases. So there's a lot of things wrong, but the one thing the current Secretary of State is an expert at is sitting on his hands and not making decisions or taking any type of risks and letting other people decide how the Secretary of State's office should operate. And you're not going to have that with both of us.
I totally agree with that with both of you. So from Janice Weiner, we'll go first to Joel and then back to Eric. Janice asked, what can we do this year to maximize voter turnout under the current laws? Joel? And try to keep it to about a minute or less.
Sure. Well, some things that I'm doing in my office. I mean, I only control one county, so I do my best to try to expand the vote. So one of the things that we just did within the last month is that we took our GIS real estate system, looked at all the residential addresses in Linn County, compared those to the registered voters in the county, and came up with the delta, the difference between the two, and came up with 13,000 households that didn't have registered voters. We then took that data and sent it out. We sent out voter registration applications to all of those unregistered households in an attempt to get some voter registrations in. We're not just going to do that once. We're going to do that 2 more times, once in the summer and once in the fall, because as we found out with the absentee ballot request forms in the newspaper, they didn't respond to the first time, but they started responding to the second, third time we did it. So I know that we've had 100, 200 come back in that way. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get a lot more people to register. My calculations are there's 15,000 to 20,000 unregistered people in Linn County based upon the census data compared to the active voter list. So we've got work to do. And that's the first step. That's as they say, that's the key to participation is registration. And that's what we need to do is get people registered to vote.
Hey, thanks a lot, Joel. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So when we're considering the current laws, and I just had this great discussion with the Butler County Democrats at their convention yesterday. We talked a lot about this, and I think what's really important is we need to, us as county auditors, we need to get the word out, public education about the changes that have happened. We've only had just the city school election in November with these new rules, and we have seen some examples of some things that we need to let our voters know about from that, but that's always a smaller turnout event. So we need to let folks know when the deadlines are for requesting absentee ballots, when we're able to send them out, when they're able to vote absentee in person. And I think most importantly, what we need to do is make sure that our absentee voters who request an absentee ballot by mail know that we can't count that ballot if we don't have it in our hands at the end of the election day when the polls close. We're set up in 2022 to reject the most absentee ballots we've rejected, at least in my time as county auditor, because now we can't use postmarks or the barcode to see if when a voter actually turned their ballot over to the U.S. Postal Service. So I think that's going to be a real important matter. I know through our websites and everything, we're going to let our voters know and say, hey, if it's the Wednesday before the election let's try to help you out. Maybe you need to start thinking about how to get that ballot hand delivered as opposed to placed in the mail, because we want to make sure it's in there before polls close so that we can count it.
Oh, thanks a lot, Eric. Now we have a question from Emily Silliman. We'll start with Eric. Take it away, Emily.
Hi, yeah, any other, so we're already starting door knocking. We have some state house primaries that I've been door knocking for, and then we have East Side Dems already doing turnout door knocking for the primary election, getting the habit of voting going for the primary so that we hope to see them again in the fall. More things that we need to know. Tell us more things we need to be talking to voters about that are changes in the law that they should be aware of. For one thing, I'm not even sure who can return a ballot. That got severely restricted, and so just comments, more of the same.
No, that's a good point. Thanks. That's a good point, Emily. Right. I was just talking about make sure they have plans to get that ballot returned by hand somehow if they can. And right, we need to let them know, look, if they're not family and they're not in your house, you can only return 2 ballots per election. And we have to keep track of that now. And there's receipts that are involved with those sorts of things. They need to know there's one drop box. We're only allowed to have one drop box, and that's got to be on the property where the county auditor's office is if they just want to drop their ballot off or that sort of thing. So I think there, especially in that area absentee. Oh, and I would suggest too, and I know you have a great group, a great organization, Johnson County, but I would also encourage you to make sure that you folks are all working together and working with Auditor Whitebird to start a plan to petition for satellite voting locations. Okay, I don't know how many satellite voting locations you do for a primary, but I know you do a lot for the general election. And that is so important to your voters, especially in our more populated counties, because that helps alleviate election day polling place lines as well. So I would really recommend that if you haven't already, that you start making a plan to petition for those satellite offices. And I would encourage you to do that in concert with your county auditor.
Thanks, Eric. Joel?
Well, I would say when you're knocking on doors, the number one question you should be asking is, what is your plan to vote? And make sure that they've identified how they're going to do that. Are they going to vote by mail? Because now we have all these deadlines. And in the case of Linn County in November 2021, that election, 296 people missed the deadline. 145 people of those voters did not vote in the election. And if that happens in the fall election this year, that's 1,000 voters in Linn County that don't vote, 400 or 500 or 1,000 that missed the deadline, 400 to 500 that don't vote. That's going to swing races across the state with that. And if you amplify that across the state, there's going to be a lot of missed opportunities there from people who just gave up and vote. So ask them, what's their plan? Is it to vote by mail? Is it to vote early? And if it is, do they know where they're going to vote early? Or they're going to go on election day? And if they go on election day, are they already registered to vote? Do they have the proper ID to get in and get a ballot and vote and get out? That's what I would say.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. A good response on both of those. As far as the satellite votes, yes, we have been probably for the last 3 weeks, we've been working with communities within Johnson County. So that's very important to us. And the plan to vote, that is critical. We've got a question from Mateen, and it's for both candidates. And we'll start with Joel this time. What can the state of Iowa do better to educate voters on the voting laws process, especially changes that are made? As a former precinct election official, I even find them incredibly complicated. Joel?
Well, they are complicated. There was 2 bills that went through in 2021. The first, I think, was 36 pages. The next one was, 10 pages. So they are complicated. And the Association of County Auditors came up with a brief, I think, 4-page summary of them. But even then, it's still 4 pages. But I would say, based upon what has happened, again, I go back to the deadlines that have been missed. The one that caused people to give up on voting, those deadlines where you have to request your absentee ballot no later than 15 days prior to the election. I mean, that caught a lot of people by surprise, and people who wanted to vote by mail. And then the other one is the one that Eric already referred to, and that's the 8 p.m. deadline on election night. So that caught 5 voters in Linn County who met the postmark guidelines, but missed getting it to our office by 8 p.m. And they weren't overseas and military voters, which there's an exception for them. You don't really have that many of them in each county by percentage wise. But that's what did it. So those are the 2 critical ones. And if people just get registered to vote, they're going to be in good shape to do it, because that means they had to produce an ID, or they had to give us the information. They had to be vetted, confirm that they were eligible to register to vote. So register to vote, those vote by mail deadlines. And just remember, you only got 20 days. And hopefully you need to lobby your county auditors to stay open all 20 days so that they can, you can have a place to vote on the weekends when maybe you're not working.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Eric?
Yeah, thanks. So so what can the state do to better educate voters? They can do anything because our current Secretary of State is not interested in voter education, let alone voter advocacy. So, things that the Secretary of State can do is, they can do news releases and get the media's attention, but they can also use, their website. They can use their social media, much like many of us county auditors do on the local level, to communicate with their voters. They can do mailings. In fact, the state has more resources and more money than many of our counties do. I mean, I visit my small county. So technically I'm like the middle county in the state. So sometimes I'm small county, sometimes I'm large, but I know how our small county auditors also work, and they don't necessarily have the resources, not only money to do a mailing, or they may not even have, Joel's idea to put it in the newspaper is great, but not many of them. A lot of those even weekly newspapers are starting to go away. So those are the things that the state really could take over, could add to what other county auditors are doing locally to educate the voters. But again, I mean, just anything, especially with these law changes. Why is the Secretary of State's office not really hammering on these things? I was on a auditor committee to go study voter ID before we had voter ID in Iowa. And we went to talk to auditors, clerks, they're the auditors in Indiana. And the one thing they all said is, because the state put aside $1 million for public education to let voters know. And they said, you're going to need a lot more than that, a lot more public education. So I think drastic changes in law like this need actual, very well supported voter education.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to have the time maybe for 2 questions. And we're going to, if you can keep your answers to 30 seconds on these. Kiran Patel asked, do you have any thoughts about how the Secretary of State office can make GIS data and data from prior elections easier for the public to interact with?
Working on it now.
Okay, thanks.
When you want to talk about GIS data, let's go. Nerds unite and let's do this. But they can really be used to reach out to our voters. We know where they're at when we use this GIS data. It's really great stuff to use. Yes, I hope to use it more. And I hope to use it when I'm Secretary of State too.
Okay, throw your email in the chat, because I know Karen is a nerd, would like you as well. So go ahead, Joel.
Well, I think based upon their poor handling of the redistricting for county supervisor districts, that I would say that they must not have very many GIS assets within their office. I mean, they just did Polk counties, I think, a week ago. So that tells me that they don't have even the kind of GIS real estate technology in their office that I have in my office, for example. I mean, that's how we were able to do this this comparison of for households that don't have registered voters in it.
Okay, thanks, Joel. Actually, let's kind of wrap up with our final question here, and then you can, you can have a full minute on this one. Sorry, I didn't mean to. hop in there. So Sharon says, if you win the Democratic primary, how will you beat Paul Pate? Can you talk about what your campaign will look like? What's the biggest challenge and how you will address it? And you got to do that in 1 minute. Take it away, Joel.
Well, I think it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. We have to go on the attack. I think that's imperative. And that's why I've been so vocal about what I've done in the past. And why I'm vocal about the new law coming through, which is basically that you're going to have to put your driver's license number on affidavit envelopes when you send in absentee ballots. There's no doubt that the Republicans and Paul Pate is again not saying anything about this. So I think we got to. So my plan is what I've done with issuing a technical infraction, printing absentee ballot request forms in the newspapers, showing the differences there, showing that I'm willing to take a chance to do whatever it takes to put voters first in this state, and that's what I've been doing for 15 years, and that's how I'm going to take the fight to Paul Pate after the primary is over. And I'm doing it right now too. I think you'll see that neither of us are really focused on each other so much. We're telling you what we're going to do when we're elected Secretary of State, and that there's going to be a Democrat in there that cares about voters and puts them first.
Hey, thanks, Joel. Really appreciate that. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Yeah, so Paul Pate's almost made it easy for us, right? I mean, it will be so easy to talk about being a voter advocate when he doesn't have a record as being a voter advocate. He didn't do anything when that poor legislation went through 21 and didn't even file against, neutral, or for that legislation. He was nowhere to be found. As Joel said, many of us county auditors took the steps to make sure our voters could vote in 20 during a pandemic by mailing out absentee ballot requests to our registered voters. These are all things we can point out, and we can point out the things. And here's what I'm excited about, because I know I can do this, because again, I've been reelected 4 times in a river county that's turned red. I am going to have a message for our no party voters, which is most of our registrations. And I know that I can get through, especially to moderate Republicans, talking to them about how it is harder for them to vote too. It's just not harder on us as Dems. It's harder on everyone. It's harder on it's going to be more difficult on snowbirds now, or our kids who have gone to college out of state. It's going to be much more difficult. We're going to tell those stories. And that's how we're going to get their attention. And that's how we're going to put a Democrat in that really nice office in the Capitol, in the Secretary of State's office.
Hey, thank you, Eric, and thank you both. Jane, do you want to go ahead and wrap up if you want to thank our guest tonight?
Play us out of here. Okay, well, it has been delightful. Thank you all so much for coming. And thank you for the contributions that so many people have made. I want to especially thank our guests, Deidre DeJear, the candidate for the governor of Iowa, Eric Van Lancker, a candidate for the Secretary of State nomination, and Joel Miller, who was a candidate for the also a candidate for the Secretary of State nomination. I learned a lot from your speeches. By the way, Deidre, I don't know if you're still on, but you absolutely hit it out of the park, as I knew you would. Thank you to the people in Potluck Insurgency who helped, especially Roseanne Cook, Janice Weiner, Ed Cranston, and Emily Silliman. And of course, a big thanks to all of you for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. We have a wonderful group of political activists who join us, and it's always great to see you. Please mark your calendars for the next Potluck Insurgency event. This is a Zoom event, April 24th at 6:30, when we'll be hosting the U.S. Senate Candidate Forum. Thank you all so much. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Eric and Joel. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Welcome.
Bye, everybody.